Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Good morning. Welcome to Community Church of Boston. My name is Dean, and I am the administrator and music director and fake minister. Sometimes I call myself that. And I get to light a candle to bring us together. We come together to create a warm and welcoming and encouraging space for radical activism here. I'll tell you about our weekend. La luta continua, says Calvin. We had a Friday night poetry event with Ketu Oladua from Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was a wonderful event featuring African American poetry and other poetry as well. A German poet whose name I don't remember. It was just great. We had some wonderful guests, including Larry Watson, who I'm really hoping will do another concert here. He's a magnificent retired Berkeley professor. Then Saturday was that huge demonstration, and I send my love and solidarity to all of those people who are out there in a sea of unity. The sights from up above were amazing all over the country. I'm sorry I wasn't with you. I had a work-related event to take care of. And then there was another event here, Sunrise Movement. In the evening, there was a online event. There was the July 26th Coalition coming together to see an online concert for Cuba. And now here we are Sunday morning. And welcome. We're really looking forward to hearing from Omar Baddar, our longtime friend who used to work in this building, actually. And we're going to open with the song about coming together in solidarity. For the people who stand up and march for their rights, solidarity, solidarity. For the ones who shine lights through the perilous night, solidarity, solidarity. So for the souls who risk everything, strong in their stance, so their children can have a fair chance. Power in unity, fighting for what can be, solidarity, solidarity. For the workers who strike for a real living wage, solidarity, solidarity. In a time where the rich rule this new gilded age, solidarity, solidarity. Where so many have nothing and a few have it all, what your grandparents fought for recalled. Hear their proud voices ring in your memory, dreams of solidarity, solidarity. For the crowds that have gathered and filled the town square, solidarity, solidarity. With hope in their hearts and their hands in the air, solidarity, solidarity. They sing down all dictators, calling their bluffs. When you've had enough, you've had enough. Every fear will recede in this great human sea of solidarity, 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 solidarity. This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before. Leonard Bernstein, 1980 or so. Well, I'd like to welcome you all and remind you that well-behaved churches seldom make history. Community Church, 105 years of good trouble. If you ever want a tour of our history of good trouble, I'd be glad to take you through our fifth floor archives that are kind of a mess, but coming together, increasingly better organized. Would love to do it anytime. Please be in touch, and I will give you the full tour. I took off my hat today because I wanted to show you. This is a hat I've worn some lately, especially in the airport a couple of times, and I've gotten some comments like, "Thank you for your service. My father served on the USS Freedom in the Pacific, 1945, and I say, well, I've tried to do some service to humanity, but I've never done military service. And then I get to tell them about the USS Liberty, and most people don't know about it and what it was. And we'll find out a lot more about it next Sunday when Philip Turney joins us. He's the director of the justiceforliberty.org, which is also sort of the Liberty, USS Liberty's alumni association, which have an annual gathering and who 65 years later still demand a true investigation into what it was that happened there. The USS Liberty, of course, the reconnaissance vessel, US flagged, that was almost sunk by the Israeli army in what appears to be a false flag operation, trying to make it look like Egypt had sunk a US ship, and it didn't turn out too well for them, and it was completely hidden by the likes of Lyndon Johnson himself, that didn't want any investigation, and of course the Israeli government and the IDF. We'll find out a lot more about that next Sunday. David Rovix has a wonderful song about the USS Liberty. A few more things. We got a box from Linda Cohen of a wonderful gift shop on Martha's Vineyard that's called Olive Branch Fair Trade. Linda Cohen sells nothing but Palestinian goods. She sent us a whole box of keffiyehs. These are Palestine keffiyehs, and we get to sell them, and it's a complete benefit for Community Church. We are in need of your help now, and if you would like a keffiyeh, I will see ya for a keffiyeh. We have a whole box of them available to you. Other events coming up. April 11th, that's a week, this Friday, we have two magnificent speakers telling us truth about what's going on and what happened back in the days leading up to the Iraq War. It is Larry Wilkerson and Dennis Fritz. The title is Deadly Betrayal, The Truth About Why U.S. Invaded Iraq. I was thinking I was not going to be here, but I am going to be here. We were going to a wedding, and then a little thing happened on February 18th, which was a serious fall on the asphalt that left me with a fractured femur, and now with a new hinge in my left hip that is healing beautifully. And I'm really on the mend and able to walk without a cane now. It's a beautiful thing. I have a few more items here on the table. A memory of another Friday event. It was a luncheon with Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who was with us, and you can see it on our YouTube channel. This is his book that he left for us, Christ in the Rubble, Faith, the Bible, and the Genocide in Gaza. To the Community Church of Boston, pray for the peace of Gaza. March 28th, 2025, Munther Isaac. This is in our library. Some more books to tell you about. By way of announcing upcoming events. This Monday and Tuesday, Peter Beinart is in town, and Monday night he will be at the Harvard Divinity School. He has a new book that's called Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza. This is a wonderful, eloquent voice. Tuesday night is the one that really interests me. It's at First Parish in Harvard Square, and it's along with come on, think of his name. He's activist from Hebron, and he's been here many times, and his name is escaping me. I'll think somebody on the Zoom must know his name, and I don't have it in front of me. But Isa Amro, thank you. Isa Amro and Peter Beinart will be presenting at the First Parish in Harvard Square. I plan to be there. And this is his book. It's in our library as well. Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, A Reckoning by Peter Beinart. Our speaker next Sunday is Phil Turney. He has written several books about the USS Liberty, and they're all unavailable, sold out on every platform. But I was able to get this one by James Scott, The Attack on the Liberty, the untold story of Israel's deadly 1967 assault on a U.S. reconnaissance ship. Here's a new one I just got, and I think it is about this moment. It's called Red Scare by Clay Risen. Clay Risen is a historian. Interesting, he's written several books about history. One is called JFK Coming of Age in the American Century, 1917 through 1956, Pulitzer Prize winning. Another interesting thing about Clay Risen is that he's written a whole bunch of books about whiskey. The Story of Kentucky Whiskey, The Impossible Collection of Whiskey, Single Malt, A Guide to the Whiskies of Scotland. Anyway, he's not upcoming yet, but I'm hoping we will get to hear from him too, because he's talking about blacklists, McCarthyism, and the making of modern America. And my sense is that we are in that era right now again. The way that dissent is being squashed totally illegally and brutally on every count, the way that universities are backing down and caving in, the way that law firms are backing down and caving in, it takes us straight back to McCarthyism, the moment when Community Church of Boston itself was blacklisted, and a number of members were paraded in front of a state house version of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Among them, one who I remember very well lived in Quincy, and he was a stonecutter and a union member and proud Marxist, and they asked him all the questions. Have you now or ever been a member? All that stuff, until Donald Lothrop got a chance to give an address to the joint session of the legislature, and it was a very famous "Have you no decency, have you no shame" speech, and a statement about community church, our interfaith, all races, all religions, all cultures stance, all genders, all orientations. And funny thing, 2 weeks later, the committee was disbanded. Love when that happens. I'm going to read a poem and then sing you a song. And then we get to hear from Omar Baddar. I can hardly wait. These are skeleton keys. I ordered them from eBay. Why did I order them? We had a real set of beautiful skeleton keys, including some from homes where we had lived, like really old houses, including some from the home of Bob Datilio, who passed away, and we inherited all of his possessions. Unfortunately, the ring of skeleton keys was stolen, along with a cassette tape of William Kunstler, which really was the one that hurt the most. The skeleton keys are replaceable, but these are some I ordered. Unfortunately, they're made in China, but you get the idea. And I show you these just to introduce this song that I love to have on the wall usually. Once, it's written by the singer-songwriter Eliza Gilkyson. Once I had a home, I still have the key, I take it everywhere I go to prove that all I've said is so and all the world can see. The walls were painted blue, front door carved by hand, and generations of my kin and strangers all were welcome in when they walked upon my land. Pray for us all and name us the fallen, faces forgotten. Once I had a home. Olive trees once grew where mounds of rubble stand. A man can feel himself a king when water flows from well and spring, and peaceful is the land. Pray for us all and name us the fallen, faces forgotten. Once I had a home. Stars shine down on bone and skin, on wire and walls that hold us in, on roads that can't lead home again. Pray for us all and name us the fallen, faces forgotten. Pray for the fallen, all the world watching. Pray for us all the world watching. Once I Had a Home by Eliza Gilkyson. I can't help but characterize my last 6 weeks as a rebirth experience. I am born again. I fell and I was fixed. And I am rising. And I'll be able to be back in my garden. And it's a miracle. And the odds of having been born in this century, here in the temple of science and medicine, and the odds that my fall was a bad fall, but it was a good fall. My friend Brian Amador is a songwriter. He has a wonderful line in his song about his Camino de Compostela journey. And the line is it's only 4 words. It's bad, good fall, good recovery. Buena caída, buena recuperación. And this is my joy that I'll be back in the garden. I wrote this an eternity ago. It is spring again. I saw the old man in his garden, inched his rocky way down dark brown rows. And though the years and the stiff joints have made it hard for him, still he's out on the first warm day, just ready to go. Every year I've seen him out on the first warm day, and he's ready to go. He's ready to dig, ready to seed, ready to water, and ready to weed. You prune and clip and spade, he will move so slowly, it'll take him all day, and the next one too. Whatever gets done we'll have to do. Might be just one and it might be 2 rows that he gets done today. Gotta take 'em as they come your way. Take 'em one by one today. And at the end of each day, he sits out on his front step, leans on his wooden cane in the last rays of sunset, and as the colors darken on a brand new garden getting smaller every year, I will stand amazed at a man's last days as the twilight draws near. He must be thinking rain, must be hoping sun, must be dreaming greener gardens. Is this his last one? You can see him growing slower, but the grace of a garden grower. When I am old, I want to stand out in my garden. I want to gaze on the work of my hand. When I grow tired and slow, may I rest assured that the fruit of this work is the bounty of this land. I want to leave it a better place. I want to give it more than I take. And then I want to go gently. I'll be thinking rain, I'll be hoping sun, I'll be dreaming greener gardens when it's my last one. You can see we're growing slower, but the grace of a garden grower. I'll be thinking rain, I'll be hoping sun, I'll be dreaming greener gardens when it's my last one. You can see we're growing slower, but the grace of a garden grower. The grace of a garden grower. Thanks very much. I can hardly wait. And Luis Guzman, our trusty, beloved janitor and cook, has told me he's going to come and help me do the serious digging. I'm ready. Good and ready. One more little item before we bring on Omar. We look up in the daybook of Eduardo Galeano, April 6th. That's today. Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days, author from Uruguay, who I'm obsessed with. Someday I will donate to Community Church if they will have them. My collection of Galeano books in hardcover, in soft cover, in English and in Spanish. There's 2 boxes of them, and I love this author. He writes a lot in short vignettes, and this is just a couple paragraphs, and it's called Night Crossing. In certain towns lost in the mountains of Guatemala, anonymous hands sew tiny worry dolls. A surefire remedy for anxiety, they calm stormy thoughts and come to the rescue when insomnia threatens. These minuscule worry dolls don't say a thing. They heal by listening. Huddled under the pillow, they absorb sorrows and regrets, doubts and debts, all the phantoms that undermine a peaceful sleep. And they carry them off magically, far off, to the secret place where night is never an enemy. That's a especially beautiful one, just because this hip thing has had me not sleeping very well at all. Just can't get comfortable at night and sleep in dribs and drabs and wake up from dreams and think about the world, and think about the country, and think about the church. I need me some worry dolls. I actually have a few in a little tiny beautiful box, and I just am transported to Guatemala, place of incredible beauty and also the darkness. I want to just in advance tell you about an event that we're having in June. It'll be an online event with an author named Christopher Nill, Nill, and this is a memoir of Chris's time in the Peace Corps, 1981 and 1982, in deep in the depths of rural Guatemala, a town called Rabinal. And that was, as you recall, the worst part of the genocide that happened in Guatemala of indigenous people. And he has a story to tell, and I couldn't put down his memoir, which is called Walking with Everardo. It's the name of his friend, Christopher Nill. That'll be in June, as of yet an undetermined date. I've been in contact with him and had phone conversation with him. I had never met him. I heard about this book. So that's all by introduction of our welcome to Omar Baddar. My trusty colleague and assistant Ahmad is with us, and there's numerous times when I've told my phone, call Omar, text Omar, and it is ended up in Omar's box. And I apologize in advance for that, Omar. And I think I've learned how to say text AMAR. That's the guy I need to talk to in a constant conversation with about a whole ton of different things. That's the first thing to say about Omar. The second thing is that Omar used to work in this building when he worked for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee that had a chapter here in Boston. I don't know if they still do, but he was their staff person, and it was a tough moment. There was one moment when our building got broken into, and their office as well, and a computer was taken, and we didn't know if it was some kind of FBI plan or if it was a homeless person, but that is still a funky memory of Omar's presence in this building. But having kept in touch over the years, and having seen Omar turn into the most eloquent, cutting-edge voice on behalf of his own people, the people of Palestine, has been a magnificent thing. And I just love that Omar has been an invited guest on that bizarre Piers Morgan show. You have to give it to Piers that he does invite guests, serious opposition voices on this to do battle with the other ultra-Zionist side, which you would not find in the United States mainstream media, or even PBS media at all. And believe me, Omar, you should look these up. Has done amazing whoop-ass battle with the likes of Dershowitz and the likes of Botich. You know about Botich? He's that sort of mega pastor rabbi. I found out something else about it. He and his daughter own a kosher dildo shop in Tel Aviv. It's true. You can't make this stuff up. But anyway, this is all by way of introducing Omar Badar. Omar, with his beautiful young family, it's really just an honor and a pleasure to have you back with us at Community Church. Last time you were here physically last summer, and now you're here with us virtually. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean. I think this is the first time that a dildo shop makes it into my introduction at a talk, so it's a unique introduction. I cannot say enough about my appreciation for the Community Church of Boston. From the time that I've worked in the building, it's still one of the most cherished times in my life, straight out of grad school, taking my first job, taking on what was then the aftermath of a 9/11 environment in which Islamophobia had gone completely out of control, anti-Arab racism, as well as American foreign policy being in a pretty rough shape. And it is kind of tragic that we are here today with all of these things having gotten substantially worse in this particular moment. Islamophobia had kind of died down towards the end of the first Trump administration, because even though he was the most Islamophobic of any president the United States has ever had, he was such an agent of chaos that Islamophobia was no longer the dominant feature of our political discourse, because he had created so much chaos on every other front. And yet what we see now is that even though this chaos persists and has gotten even worse with this administration, Islamophobia is still being thrust back into the forefront in a way. And on the back of 18 months of genocide in Gaza, it is difficult to know what is left to say, to be honest with you. I mean, whenever there is an invitation to speak, it's difficult to kind of overcome that bit of feeling of despair of what is there left to say that has not been said over the past 18 months. We have a unique event unfolding in Gaza, unlike anything else we've ever seen in history. It's not because genocide hasn't been committed before. Obviously, there have been many genocides in the world, unfortunately. But this is the first live streamed genocide that everybody can access on their phones and their social media feeds. Day in and day out, you're able to turn on that screen and watch children being shredded by the Israeli military using American-supplied weapons. And there's no end in sight for the way things are going right now. There is a divide in the way that Americans understand what's unfolding in Gaza that is divided by age, and it's not difficult to understand why there is that divide. There are younger people who primarily access information through the internet, and there's an older generation that still relies on cable news and legacy media to consume information. And so when you look at opinion polls, you see that younger Americans are far more upset by this policy, think continued American support for Israel's genocide is not a moral path forward, that there should be an end to that support. But you look at a generation of sort of the leading politicians in this country that still rely on legacy media, you see that there is still a functioning in an outdated mindset in which you just reflexively support Israel, right or wrong. It's not even a topic of discussion or debate. Our politicians function like malfunctioning bots that are programmed to just repeat, I support Israel, Israel has the right to defend itself, no matter what you ask them in relation to Israel. That is the only answer that they have. And if the media did its job of exposing the American public to what is unfolding, I have no doubt that this genocide would end within a couple of weeks. That if Americans were subject, of all ages, voters had thrust into their face day in and day out the consequences of American policy, the actual impact on real human beings, there would not be another politician in this country that can get up and say, I stand in support of this mass slaughter of children. They can only support it using euphemisms because people don't see the consequences of America's actions. And that is what has been depressing about all of this. Even recently, protesting the Trump's fascism and authoritarian overreach, you had somebody like Cory Booker take a stand for 24 hours on the Senate floor, filibustering, insisting that we have to address the deep and dark policies that Trump has sprung on all of us, and yet immediately turns around after that and votes to send more weapons to Israel while Israel is in the midst of committing this genocide. To then have to withstand, to endure all this rhetoric across all the networks about what a brave and conscientious person Cory Booker is for standing up to Donald Trump in light of what he has turned around and done is frankly suffocating for those of us who are paying attention to American foreign policy and what is unfolding there. It's not as if Cory Booker himself gets anything out, supports the killing of Palestinian children because he benefits in some way from that killing. It is purely political cowardice that we see in our political class of politicians who want to take the easy way out, to not engage on difficult topics, and the autopilot mode, the default mode, is to just say you support Israel and keep sending them weapons. And we desperately have to change that. We are, in my view, witnessing the darkest chapter in American politics of my lifetime, at least. Donald Trump has come along. The reason why he has come along, again, something that you don't see acknowledged in our media discourse about this, is in part because of what Joe Biden has done in Gaza. It is because, a pretty significant percentage of voters could not bring themselves to turn out and vote for an administration that has insisted on no accountability for Israel in the midst of the worst crimes imaginable, and said that they were not going to deviate from that policy, causing significant suppression, effectively, of progressive turnout, because people cannot bring themselves to vote for this atrocity. And that's part of the reason why Donald Trump has come along. And Donald Trump has come along now talking about the full ethnic cleansing of Gaza, building on what the Democrats have enabled through their policy of spinelessness, of never standing up to Israel anyway. And Donald Trump, frankly, is a dark force in many other areas. He is dismantling entire government agencies that are funded by Congress. He's doing so unconstitutionally. There is just naked corruption and conflict of interest all over this administration, in which they cut the needs of the American people in order to turn around and give more money and tax breaks and government deals to their corporate friends. There is a shutting down of corporate accountability across the board, of cases being dropped that are against corporate wrongdoers, of the CFPB being dismantled, the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the agency that is responsible for returning billions of dollars to American consumers that are stolen by corporations. That agency is now under the threat of dismantlement by this administration. And you have an acceleration towards climate disaster by abandoning any sensible climate policies and doubling and tripling down on fossil fuels. Every way that you look at it, Trump is a serious threat, frankly, to human survival on this planet. And in the short term, where you see the most egregious fascist assault that we're witnessing domestically is the attempt to dismantle the First Amendment by going after people who are speaking out against the atrocities in Gaza. People who are critics of Israel's government are now being treated like criminals by our government, being told that to oppose genocide is equal to supporting terrorism. You could not get any more Orwellian than that. That the definition of terrorism is the use of violence against civilians to produce political outcomes. This is transparently what Israel is doing on a genocidal scale. And you have people who are objecting to that state-sponsored genocidal level of terrorism being accused of supporting terrorism on account of their opposition to terrorism. That is what we're witnessing. And people are being snatched up from their homes, off of streets, being thrown in dungeons under threat of deportation. You have sometimes documented immigrants, not just undocumented immigrants, being shipped off to torture chambers in other countries. It is a very, very deeply dark moment right now that we're witnessing. But it doesn't get worse in its most egregious form in this moment than it is with the literal shredding of dozens of children every single day. And in one case, just a few weeks ago, it was the killing of up to 200 Palestinian children in a single day. We have become so numb as a society that you can commit the most egregious massacre of children in history in a single day. No other massacre compares. And yet you can still proceed with our mainstream media not acknowledging it, our politicians not addressing it, as if everything is normal, as if Palestinian death is normal. And it's all built on this lie that what Israel is doing is a targeted operation of which Palestinian civilians are an unintended consequence when they are injured or killed, when anybody who is paying attention to the details of what we're seeing understands very well that this is a deliberate war on the civilian population in Gaza. You have reports of doctors that visit who say we've never seen so many single bullet sniper wounds to the heads and chests of children in what is an obvious pattern of deliberately murdering children. You have Israeli policies by intelligence analysts that are leaked in the Israeli press talking about the deliberate targeting of what they call power targets, high-rise residential buildings without any warning and toppling them down. We have this recent massacre just a couple of days ago of a Red Cross crew in Gaza, where Israel ambushed them, even though they were obviously marked as medical personnel with sirens on and all. They killed them, execution style, and then they buried their bodies and the ambulances to try to cover up what they had done. And time and again, Israel lies about all these incidents. And then when they're caught lying, they backtrack on the lie step by step until the thing is just out of the news cycle and nobody's talking about it anymore. You have Israel telling Palestinians to go to safe zones to get out of harm's way, and then drops massive 2,000-pound bombs on those safe zones, killing endless people. The bombing of tents that civilians run and shelter in. The literal burning alive of men, women, and children. It is genuinely difficult to try to convey the absolute madness of the fact that we live now in a society in which you can carry this on in a live stream fashion for 8 months straight, 18 months straight, and still proceed as if life is normal, and still have entire political conversations and shows about anything else. How can you proceed talking about anything else when children are literally being shredded with American money and weapons being used by a genocidal foreign government? And what's worse is that there was a time under the Biden administration in which everybody understood that Israel was committing genocide. Anybody who's, again, paying attention understood very well that the Biden administration was never going to challenge Israel to a point of actually putting an end to this genocide. But there was some tension. There was tension in Biden saying, we desperately need a ceasefire agreement. Israel is killing too many civilians. We don't approve. There was all this back and forth that forced Israel, was costing Israel on a PR front, in that they could not be open about the fact that they want to commit genocide. They had to pretend that they have no intentions of occupying Gaza or taking it over, and this is all an operation. It was just an avalanche of lies. And when Trump comes along and proposes the complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza as his official plan, it opens the door for Israel to no longer pretend. And so when you listen to what Netanyahu says in more recent interviews, the plan right now is to continue squeezing Gaza, and by squeezing they mean divide up and bomb and obliterate people left and right, until Hamas surrenders. That is one stated goal. But then it's followed up with, once Hamas surrenders, then we begin the implementation of Trump's plan. Trump's plan being, quote unquote, voluntary displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Of course, for any thinking human being, there's nothing voluntary about destroying people's lives in a place, destroying a place's ability to sustain life, and then ask people if they want to get away or if they want to stay. That is forced displacement. That is ethnic cleansing. That is genocide towards ethnic cleansing, and it is now the official policy of Israel, declared out in the open, no longer pretending, and it has the full backing of our government, with no one in sight at this point who's able to put a stop to it. It is a deeply, deeply dark moment right now, and it is difficult to look for signs of hope in all of this. And from Israel's perspective, it's not even only about Gaza. They want to entrench their dominance over the entire region. That is why they are, even though they got the ceasefire from Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hezbollah agreed to essentially withdraw completely from the border area, and yet Israeli bombings of Lebanon are practically daily. You have the same in Syria, where the last government fell, and the new government has come along and said, we don't want confrontation with Israel of any kind. And that has not stopped, despite the fact that the new Syrian government is completely passive in the face of Israel. This did not stop Israel from substantially expanding its territory in Syria, of bombing Syrian military facilities, of killing Syrian protesters who are protesting against Israeli occupation of Syrian territory. And the violence just continues, again, day after day after day. That is what a lot of Western mainstream corporate media refers to as a lull, or a ceasefire, or a time of quiet. As long as the killing is one-sided, that is not worthy of registering on anybody's radar. Now, the second there is a rocket that flies out of Lebanon or Syria to hit Israel in return, you will instantly hear corporate media focus on it and describe Israel's actions then as retaliation to whatever happened, because we're constantly in this broken default of treating Israel as responding to everything, instead of acknowledging the obvious fact that Israel is an occupying force today in Lebanon, in Palestine, and in Syria. A militarily occupying force, and an occupation is inherently an offensive posture. There is no such thing as the occupied people initiating violence, because the occupation itself is violence. And on top of that, we see Israel's daily bombings. It's not just the occupation as a static, but it's a very, very violent occupation, and a murderous one that takes the lives of Palestinians, Lebanese, and Syrians alike, with Gaza obviously suffering the brunt of it, and now Israeli military operations expanding in the West Bank, with tens of thousands of Palestinians displaced there as well. And the big thing that Israel is after right now is, of course, Iran. Israel knows it can't take on Iran by itself, and they are desperate to drag the United States into a confrontation with Iran. And the Trump administration might just be stupid and reckless enough to fall for it. We are told that the reason we have a problem with Iran is because they're not allowed to have nuclear weapons, and we're worried about their nuclear program. Before we get to the merits of that argument, just consider for a moment that the United States is a nuclear-armed state that has, in fact, used nuclear weapons in war before. Israel is also a nuclear-powered state, and they are going to enforce Iran not getting nuclear weapons. The moral hypocrisy just described in the idea that the rules apply for some countries but not others, that Israel is entitled to get things that Iran is not entitled to, is itself tells the entire story in a way. But even if you were to accept that and take a realistic perspective of saying, yes, the United States is the dominant force, it gets to allow some countries to develop nuclear weapons, even within that, there is no indication that Israel is developing a nuclear weapon. That is the assessment of every intelligence agency in the world, including the American intelligence agencies and the UN monitors. And there was a deal already that guaranteed that Iran could not one day develop nuclear weapons. That was the Obama nuclear deal, in which there was full monitoring of Iran's nuclear weapons program. Iran's nuclear program. It's not a weapons program. It's a nuclear energy program, to ensure that they cannot enrich uranium to a point that could one day potentially become a threat. And yet, Donald Trump, with the support of Israel, came along and tore up that deal. And that exposes the lie that the concern is about Israel's nuclear program. Because if it was, that was a solved problem. You had an agreement in place in which the US lifted sanctions off of Iran in exchange for Iran allowing the US and the international community to monitor their nuclear energy program to make sure it can never be turned into a nuclear weapons program. The reason why they tore up that deal is because what they want from Iran is more than just a nuclear program. What they want is complete Iranian submission to Israeli dominance in the region. That is what is being demanded. And in pursuit of that, you have Netanyahu right now pushing very aggressively to get Trump to bomb Iran for him. And we have a posture from Donald Trump right now that is extremely hawkish and aggressive, building up the US military forces in the region, with constantly hinting at the possibility of bombing Iran, giving them an ultimatum and saying that military force could be used very soon. And that is the climate that we're in today. And when Donald Trump creates a financial crisis of epic proportions with his moronic implementation of tariffs that are not strategic, are not thoughtful, it's just a ham-handed way of dealing with the world that ends up causing an economic crisis across the world and in the US. One of the ways in which Trump can distract from that failure is by launching a new war. He himself has talked about wars as means of distraction when he was criticizing other presidents in the past, saying that this is what they do to distract from their failures. And we seem to be poised right now for that potential war. And a war with Iran would be unbelievably catastrophic. It would be substantially worse. I mean, as insane and as monstrous and devastating as the Iraq war was, in terms of the immediate death toll of Iraqis, its impact on US strategic interests, the way that things played out in the region with the rise of ISIS and everything else, a war with Iran can have even more catastrophic consequences because Iran is an infinitely bigger country with a far larger missile capabilities that can impact many countries in the region. And the future looks very uncertain if things are allowed to drift in that direction. That is the political moment we're in. An authoritarian president domestically who is destroying free speech and the economic well-being of this country and is attacking judges, a policy of supporting genocide abroad, and the possibility of a catastrophic regional war. The only sign of hope that I can think of, I mean, you don't want to end a talk like this about how dire and desperate everything looks. You want to look for signs of hope. And the only sign of hope that I can see from where I'm sitting is the fact that younger Americans understand why all of this is awful. They are not in power yet, but the future looks more promising 20 years from now for what the direction of American policy is going to be. The threat is, can we make it that far? What happens between now and then? And that is the urgency that we face right now, in that every single person's voice is desperately needed to preserve what we have right now before it completely falls apart. And that is why every minute counts. It used to be that it's important to protest because every year that goes on, something horrible happens. In this case, every minute that goes on, there's more death and destruction of lives in Gaza, a more serious assault on civil liberties here at home. And so this is a moment of urgency that even in the face of such dark dangers, without a clear map for how we get out of this during the Trump administration, we cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. We cannot afford to throw our hands up. Hopelessness in this moment is a non-starter. It's not an option. Because if we're going to fight for a future for our children and for future generations, it is incumbent on all of us to take the urgency of this moment seriously and to do absolutely everything that we can to even just present hope and light a candle in the darkness and show that there's still going to be a force for resisting an unjust world and fighting to make it a better or more worthwhile place. And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
If I stood out in the rain night, my only light a candle, 1,000,000 miles away, would you lay down your fire as I raised mine? Would you not kill again? And oh, when you're near me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me, oh my darling one. If I walked as one of many, my only time, the present, now and here. Would you undo those bombs, one for each step taken, and let a future draw near? And oh, when you're with me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me, oh my darling one. I had to take that candle image that Omar finished with and bring you that little poem by my friend Cindy Callett. This is the moment when we tell you that we need your help to keep this thing going, to create this space of refuge and hope for so many groups that meet here to organize and to plan and scheme. I'll give you a little list, and Crystal and I, our publications manager, have been dreaming about sort of featuring this in our publicity. It's just a list of groups, and it's growing. Extinction Rebellion, yeah. Democratic Socialists of America Palestine Working Group, yeah. Democratic Socialists of America, several other working groups, yeah. These groups all meet here to plan and scheme and to celebrate and to enjoy good food and companionship. I continue with the list. Muslims for Progressive Values. Fifth Ward Democrats. Veterans for Peace Smedley Butler Brigade. All these groups meet here and plan and scheme. And the most recent one is a group that's having and you might be interested in this, they're having a conference here on a Saturday afternoon in April. And they're called Boston Independent Journalists Network. And it includes Jason Pramus and Chris Ferrione, the publishers of the local zine rag that's called Dig. And it's a whole host of Boston-based journalists who write about all kinds of things that you don't usually see in the mainstream media. You won't see it in the Globe. You won't see it in the Herald. And they're making this place a place to organize and to help scheme about how to get the word about local stories. For example, how to get the word out about local actions of ICE, the nabbings that they've been doing, not only of Palestine activist students, but of just Salvadorans, Guatemalans walking down the road that don't have the proper documentation, or that sometimes do. They don't even discriminate anymore. It's really a very sad thing. I'm going to end here, and then we'll have a conversation with Omar with a song that I've loved since I heard it from the social media of a young Palestine influencer. Her name is Iman Askar, and she might be like 23 years old. And she wrote this song, which I think of inspiration from the mouth of babes or a child shall lead them sort of thing. Just the obvious message that can come about a Middle Eastern conflict that has been written and scholarized and argued about for so long, for so much. But this to me is the most simple description of it. It's called The Story of Palestine. There once was a land called Palestine, where Christians, Muslims, Jews lived fine. In the 1800s it was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Meanwhile a bearded guy founded Zionism for Jews to aspire, a land that becomes their home and safe only for their kind. Then there was World War I that ended when the Allies won, and England was like, hey, this beautiful land is totally mine. Still the name was Palestine, even though it was colonized, and a promise for a Zionist state was a man made by a man who had no right. Then more and more Jews arrive seeking refuge, and that's all right, until their plan to steal the land they could no longer hide. The year was 1948 when Israel bullied its way into a state, and thousands of Palestinians fled their homes just to survive. No right to return, no right for a home, no right to fight for the land they own. Israel expanded more and more into an apartheid. Where is your humanity? Where is your respect for dignity? Call it flat conflict, that's insanity. It's time to change your mind. One day Palestine will be free, so be on the right side of history. It's not anti-Semitic if you stand against war crimes. Don't be brainwashed by the news. Now you can see for yourself their truth. Learn about the story of Palestine. Iman Askar. Well, thank you, folks, and thank you, Omar, for those words of incredible inspiration and eloquence. I wonder if there's anyone who wants to engage in a conversation or ask Omar a question. First, I want to just send out a word of solidarity and healing to Dan the Bagel Man, who is hospitalized at St. Elizabeth's Hospital with lots of antibiotics being plugged into him intravenously. Dan, we wish you well, and we wish you a speedy recovery. It's really not a fun place to be, and I can tell you that from personal experience. We miss you on the streets feeding homeless people. Dan Kontoff, Dan the Bagel Man, thinking about you. A question or comment from Calvin? Let me bring you a microphone. Yes, we have microphone.
Just one comment. I couldn't help but notice a couple of books in your bookcase, Omar, that I actually have in my library at home. I've got a copy of The Israel Lobby, signed by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, and I noticed The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. I also have a signed copy of that, but I'm sure the titles of those other books are just as great.
Thank you. It's all essential reading for sure for this moment.
I had a copy of John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt around here, and somebody took it and has not returned it. Whoever you are, bring it back now. We want it. Yes, hi. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Join us.
Hi, I'm Leah. And I think it sounds like all the wars just to make money and steal land. In Vietnam, they were drafting all the boys when I was there. And it's just to make money and steal land.
Yes.
If I can react to that real quick, I'll just say the U.S. public does not benefit. What we have here is a system in which the U.S. military-industrial complex, the U.S. military-industrial complex benefits from the continuation of this so-called conflict. We sell weapons endlessly. Whenever the U.S. says that we give Israel X billion dollars in military funding, that's all funding that comes back to U.S. military corporations. And so you have a system in which the American people suffer as a consequence of what is unfolding. And the people in Palestine obviously suffer. And frankly, the people of Israel are not going to be better off pursuing this genocidal policy. And so in terms of the impact on people, it's universally bad for everyone. And yet the handful of military corporations that make money, those are the people who are benefiting in the US. And people with a messianic vision of Israel capturing all of that land for religious reasons, those people, I suppose, are getting something out of it. But sometimes we speak loosely in terms of one country benefiting from a policy of war, when really it's an extremely tiny minority of people within that country that benefit at the expense of ordinary people. And I think that that point is worth emphasizing as well.
Omar, I wonder if you'd tell us your thoughts on this situation with college campuses, basically bending a knee, renouncing free speech, abandoning their own students, and the students, looks like cooperating with ICE to nab students wherever they like. It's such a horrible thing. The most recent one was this Tufts student who just, that footage of her just being basically just kidnapped off the street at Tufts, followed by a huge, really impressive demonstration on the Tufts campus. And I give it to young activists like that, but it's just, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, and other universities caving, and it seems like no concerted effort on the part of college presidents and provosts and comptrollers to face this thing down.
We are witnessing, beyond just college campuses specifically, a moment of incredible cowardice of pretty much most institutional power and corporate power bowing to the Trump administration, in a way that we had actually seen some level of people being willing to challenge the Trump administration the first time around, when Trump was seen as a fluke in a way, that he was an aberration, a mistake, a glitch. And now there's a different appreciation. There's a sort of appreciation for the fact that he represents a significant portion of the country and is a force to be, to reckon with. And what we see in the face of this vindictive administration that has gone after all of its critics, media outlets that have spoken out against it, legal firms that have criticized it in any way, that is a vindictive administration that is willing to use its power against institutions. But that's precisely the reason to need to have some courage in this moment. And the way that educational institutions have completely just given up their responsibility towards their students, towards the First Amendment. I mean, we pretend that America is number one at a lot of things. There's just a cultural thing of like, we're the best country ever in every way possible. It only holds up to scrutiny in two ways. We are the most powerful country in the world. That is true militarily. We spend more on our military than any other country in the world, and more than the top 8 combined that come after us. But the other uniquely American thing that actually is very valuable is the First Amendment. Even in Western Europe, there aren't laws that protect free speech the way there are in the United States. The First Amendment and the protection of free speech is absolutely crucial. And to see how easily that's folding and collapsing in the face of complete cowardice by these institutions, I think has been very, very depressing. It all stems from an attempt by Israel's apologists at conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. It's that definition that conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism is called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. The lead author of this definition is a man by the name of Ken Stern. And he said, this definition is overly broad. I wrote it specifically for broad data collection of anti-Semitism. But if you try to apply it as the working definition of anti-Semitism on college campuses, then you're going to destroy free speech. So please don't do it. That's the author of that definition, saying, do not use my definition to weaponize the charge of anti-Semitism against students who are critical of Israeli policy. And yet, his take is completely disregarded. And fascist institutions like the ADL and others are more than happy to just continue pushing for that definition to be implemented in a way that is just utterly disgusting. And institutions like the ADL even now equate wearing a keffiyeh with support for terrorism. Imagine that, just a basic cultural symbol of Palestinian identity and culture is now equated to violence and anti-Semitism. There is an overreach by people who are desperate to shut down free speech and open discussion on this, And the reason is obvious, frankly. It's because we got to the point to where you can no longer defend Israel's crimes on merit. You cannot defend these policies because they are outrageous and monstrous, and anybody who hears about them is going to oppose them instantly. And so what they do instead is resort to weaponizing anti-Semitism to shut down the debate and the discussion on it. And had it just been random groups doing it, it would be one thing. But to see that weaponization being used by the president and the government at the threat of snatching people out of their homes and throwing them in prison cells, awaiting deportation or whatever else, that this is the moment that we're in, and our institutions are caving to that pressure instead of standing up for students, is a deeply, deeply disturbing reality right now. And it goes beyond advocacy for Palestine. It's how we deal with free speech and the First Amendment more broadly moving forward in this country.
Here's your terrorist symbol, folks. You can pick one up right here at Community Church. We just got a whole box of them. It's a full benefit for our church. You can get your own keffiyeh. We also have a display of them, several colors from different countries on our wall as well. It's a beautiful thing, and wear it proudly, despite Tom Cotton claiming it's akin to a swastika. We know better than that. Folks, we have the waft of luncheon. Looks like we have somebody online wants to join us and join in the conversation. Go ahead.
Hello, Omar. Haven't seen you for a while, brother. How you doing?
It has been a while, Mark. How are you?
Okay. I wanted to ask you this question. Well, so how do you see Israeli citizens? Polls continuously show that they support the war. If they want a ceasefire, they just want to get the hostages back. They do not want a two-state solution. There's nobody inside the Knesset, and they just have a very negative, racist view of Palestinians.
It is true, and I think that this is a moment sometimes that gets missed on Americans. In the United States, things are progressing in a better direction in the sense that most of the racist attitudes that we have belong to an older generation of people. And younger people are generally more progressive, more diverse, more embracing of diversity and tolerance. And in Israel, it's really the opposite. That the trajectory that Israel is on is one of increasingly anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian racism growing. And that's reflected in the shift in Israeli policies. I mean, it's always been anti-Palestinian, obviously, from the get-go, because the establishment of Israel came at the expense of Palestinians. But the extremism and utter disregard for human life, so long as they're Palestinian, that is now the dominant part of Israeli political discourse. And I think we have to be honest about it. And there isn't anything difficult. You know, there's a lot of accusations of anti-Semitism related to that, but if you talk about it this way, then you're somehow attacking all Jews. First of all, Jews in the United States are infinitely more progressive than the general population. So this is not a characterization of Jews. This is about a specific phenomenon that is occurring inside Israeli society. And the second thing I would say about it is that it's not fundamentally different from attitudes during segregation in the United States. The majority of white people in this country supported segregation, and pointing that out does not make you anti-white. You're just describing what the dominant attitude is, and a majority of people can still be wrong. That is self-evident, and that is what we've had in this country, and that is what we currently have within Israel. We have our politics in relation to Israel make it very difficult to address this honestly, but it is the reality that we live in today, and you don't have a situation in which Palestinians and Israelis can work it out on their own. There is an imbalance of power where Israel holds all the power and their attitude is extremely anti-Palestinian, and no part of Israeli society in the foreseeable future can produce respect and dignity and freedom for Palestinians. And that is why the international solidarity with Palestine is so crucial, is that this has to be enforced from without. That when a powerful population, a powerful country is imposing a level of injustice on another people, and that country happens to be dependent on American military support to allow it to do that, then that is where we need to be focusing our pressure. It is about ending that military funding as the first and necessary step to achieving a change towards equality and justice in Palestine and Israel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark Harrison. Thanks for joining us. And we have Dorothy. Hello, Dorothy. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I on this last point, I thought that there was not the information getting into the population of Israel, that the press is not as free as here, and that they are not hearing about the deaths as clearly as we are. For example, we're hearing, at least I am, about doctors who come back to the U.S. and say what's happening. They don't have this kind of information. Do you agree with that? Do you know if I might be right, Omar?
Partly, not entirely. And strangely, there is a broader range of opinion within Israel in the press than there is in the United States. The stuff that gets published in Haaretz, a leading Israeli paper that is sort of like left-oriented within Israel, is stuff that you would never see here. It speaks with a level of bluntness about Israeli atrocities in a way that you don't see CNN or MSNBC or whatever, New York Times or Washington Post. We don't speak about it in the same sense. Now, the problem is that even though that range of debate is wider within Israeli society, it still represents a very small fraction of the Israeli population. That the majority of Israelis do not bother read publications like Haaretz, even though it's a leading Israeli publication. It's popular within a particular segment of Israeli society. So I know it sounds like a paradox, but I would say that even though Israeli human rights organizations and Israeli press make some room within a particular sliver of that discourse for views that are more critical of Israeli policy and speak more honestly about what Israel is doing, I think the majority of Israeli population at this point dismisses that and does not pay any attention to it, which is different than our situation. If those views were present in America's mainstream discourse, I think you would have a lot more people who are attuned to it and paying attention to it and demanding a policy change based on it.
Okay, thank you.
Omar, we have among our congregation radical Jewish people who are also practicing Jewish, as well as longtime members of Community Church of Boston. I remember when we took a stand after October 7th and we made a statement, one of them called me and said, but you have to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. And I sort of was quiet for a while and responded by saying, well, I will acknowledge a little part of that statement. I will acknowledge that Israel exists. And that's not going to end anytime soon. I say that to preface a question to you, if you know anything about what's called this weekly meeting that's called Israel-Palestine Confederation, where they're putting together a sort of a mock legislature of what a one-state might look like, that has a confederation of both Israel and Palestine. I haven't been able to get on to it because they meet on Sunday at 12, which is right now, and I'm always in this church when that happens. And it seemed like such a really interesting, maybe tiny sliver of hope. Although our own good friend that you know, Mazen Kumsia, who has presented for us a number of times is not very positive about the Israel-Palestine Confederation. They have voices from both sides speaking and debating and arguing. I wonder if you know anything about that, or if you know of any other maybe little slivers of hope in this present conundrum moment.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that particular group, but I can address sort of just based on the conversation that you mentioned. I have a few thoughts on it. The way I think the point that is worth emphasizing is just whenever there's a debate about Israel's right to exist or not or whatever, I think it is worth pointing out that Israel is the most powerful country in the region, and the society that is not being allowed to exist is Palestinian society. There is no Palestinian state. The obvious question is, does Palestine have the right to exist? That should always be the leader. I mean, just to talk about a country that is armed with nuclear weapons and say you have to say they have the right to exist while their victims are being annihilated, I think to me is having a little bit backwards. But a second part of it, I think that a point that is worth emphasizing for people who do have a feeling of insecurity about this is that no matter what vision you have for the final outcome in Palestine and Israel, it is certainly a future in which Israelis get to live safe and free and equal to everyone else. To me, that's the point that is worth emphasizing, because whenever somebody argues against the state of Israel, there is an assumption that it's a future in which ordinary Israelis can have no future of safety and equality in that land. And I think that's wrong. If the way Israel came into being is unjust, it came into being at the expense of Palestinians who were driven from their homes by the tens of thousands, who were by the hundreds of thousands, over 700,000 Palestinians driven out from their homes. Hundreds of towns and villages completely destroyed to prevent the return of Palestinians to their homes. And to insist on Israel's so-called right to exist in that context is effectively to imply that it is correct, it was right for Israel to do this to Palestinians. Now, if you want a compromise in which Israel can exist, that was negotiated in the 1990s under the auspices of the two-state solution. The Palestinians were willing to let go of a significant majority of their land for the sake of a tiny Palestinian state in the occupied territories, the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. Those are the areas that the entire world agrees are not part of Israel, and Israel is obligated to leave. And Israel's response was to systematically build more and more and more settlements throughout those occupied territories, making that compromise impossible. So to look at a situation in which Palestinians were willing to accept a compromise that allows Israel to be a state on the majority of their land, and Israel scoffs at it and insists on continuing to destroy Palestinian society brick by brick, and then somebody comes along and says, well, what about Israel's right to exist? You cannot hold that position without vigorously opposing everything that Israel has done over the past several decades. And right now, I agree, it feels like a moot debate, one state solution, two state solution, in the sense that neither of them is on the political horizon. It is difficult to imagine how either of them would come about under the current circumstances of this genocide, what coexistence looks like after this genocide. I personally do not care about whether we talk about one state, two states, 13 states, or 27 states. The thing that we should have consensus on, and by the way, we can, of course, talk about this. Certainly the vision that I personally would embrace is one in which there is one country in which everybody lives equally together. But absent that, what we should be focused on is the point of universal agreement of anybody who supports either a one-state or a two-state solution, which is that Israel's occupation and massacres against Palestinians are utterly unacceptable, and the US needs to stop supporting them immediately. And as long as we agree on step one, which is end American support for Israeli apartheid, for Israeli genocide, for Israeli occupation, if we can get that done, then we'll have more fertile ground to start talking about what a future vision looks like.
Wow. Thank you, Omar. I need to listen to that several times and digest it and learn how to say it in my own words. That was just so eloquently said. One more question before we have the beautiful luncheon that Luis has prepared for us. I wonder if you'd help me respond to my brother-in-law. I saw him recently at a funeral of another brother-in-law, and over dinner at a restaurant, I mentioned the Israeli genocide and the reaction. And I'll tell you that I come from an evangelical family. My parents are evangelical missionaries in Costa Rica, and out of our 6 kids, two of them are still deeply in that direction, and the other 4 are either deeply in a different direction or waffle back and forth somehow. But his response to my talking about Israeli genocide in Gaza was, "Boy, we live in 2 different bubbles. Where do you get your information from?" My information comes from the Bible. The Bible says that God gave the land of Israel to the Israelites, and that was the land for them, and that Hamas is threatening that. That was sort of an end of the discussion. We decided to talk about football and the weather pretty quickly until dinner was served. And it's just such a bizarre thing, this Christian Zionism, that I just cannot grasp. Mike Huckabee basically wanting annexation of the West Bank, not saying we will not call it the West Bank anymore, we will call it Judea and Samaria, and just steeped in this kind of biblical prophecy that came from a certain Bible that's called the Schofield Bible. I'm just learning about what that is all about, just a publication of a Bible that was deeply funded by Zionists and also that emphasized these very nebulous supposed prophecies about the second coming and about Israel. And anyway, I wonder if what you think about Christian Zionism and how to counter it and how to come up with an argument to that kind of a sort of just one-sided view.
Yeah, there are certainly people who are better informed about the theological debate who might be able to offer arguments within that realm that are more helpful, better certainly than I could. The 2 things that I point out in this case, if I run into these folks, is like, listen, we can't debate religion. We have different beliefs about this. The 2 things that are worth noting is that a significant portion of the Palestinian population is Christian, and they are suffering massacres by the Israeli military. Their churches are being bombed. Their movement is being restricted. They're being mistreated on a daily basis. You can see that. And so as a Christian, you have to reconcile what it means to support the brutalization and mistreatment of other Christians in the name of your faith. And the other aspect of it is that it's a fundamental part. Even though I'm not super deep into Christianity, I understand enough about Jesus' teachings to know that kindness and empathy and equality and generosity are core teachings. And no matter who you think this land belongs to, even if your view is that God is a real estate agent, I see Mark's comment in the chat, which I agree with entirely. God is not a real estate agent, and it's a funny way to think about things. But even if you were to believe that, surely the killing of children cannot be supported by Christian theology. Surely you can look at that and say that is morally wrong and reprehensible, and we should oppose it. So those would be the 2 things that I would want to point out in that specific context. But certainly there are many other, if you talk to Palestinian Christians about it, they might be able to engage on the theological front in a little bit more detail than I could.
Here we should have asked Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who was just here last week and gave us a lovely, we had a reception and a luncheon for him, and he talked about his book and about the situation of Christians in Palestine. Also, another one is Mazen, who we've had numerous times, including once at 2 o'clock in the morning, Palestine time, because he wanted to honor his commitment. He wasn't able to travel. It was 7 p.m. Here, and he still wanted to do it even though it was 2 in the morning there. Omar, we'll let you go back to your beautiful family, 2 young children, and we hope to see you again soon. It's really really wonderful, edifying thing to hear your words to us, and I want to listen to it a couple more times just to retain all the wisdom that you gave us this morning and all the information you gave us this morning. Folks, let's say thank you again to Omar Baddar for joining us today.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all you Zoomsters and YouTubers. Join us this Friday. We have an amazing program. Colonel Larry Wilkerson and Captain Dennis Fritz, 2 retired military leaders who are also involved in different White Houses, talking about the origins of the fiasco known as the Iraq War, maybe the worst thing ever in the United States history. Well, there was Vietnam, and there is Gaza right now. So we bid you farewell, and we hope to see you again soon. We have lots of great programming. Find out more about Community Church. Become a member. Become a voice in our programming and in our outreach to the community to create a safe and welcoming and comforting and space full of images on the wall and great food, which is what we're going to do now. Thank you, Luis Guzman, for the lunch you are spreading out for us now. And I say to everybody, brothers, now our meeting is over. Brothers, we must part. Brothers, we'll farewell, but I will hold you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. Sisters, now our meeting is over. Sisters, we must part. Sisters, we'll be gone, but I will hold you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore, and be safe forevermore. Dan the Bagel Man, heal soon. We hope to see you all again here. Lots of great programs coming up. Get out on the streets, speak your mind, do good work, call your Congress critters, get activist. Let's change the world. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Hasta la próxima.
Recording stopped.